Good morning, everyone. After the recent cheat client ban, a lot has changed on RuneLite. Lots of plugins that were previously only available on cheat clients have been added to default RuneLite or the plugin hub. So, in today's video, I want to make a full-on guide on which plugins I use during ToB and what they're used for. A few of the plugins that I'll discuss are Socket, Bloathand Highlights, a P3 tanking tick counter, and Wheelchair. All of the plugins I'm discussing are on default RuneLite or the plugin hub. Never install plugins in any other way. The plugins on RuneLite and the plugin hub are all legal and most importantly safe to use. Jagex has been working with RuneLite to ensure no plugins that break their terms of service made it past evaluation. Furthermore, all the plugins on RuneLite and the plugin hub only get released after having been screened for malicious intent. While plugin hub plugins may not always work the way they were intended to, due to bugs or updates, RuneLite protects its users by making sure nothing shady gets added to the plugin hub. Stay on RuneLite, fellas. Okay, so let's get some of the basics out of the way. First, I want to talk about animation smoothing, GPU, and HD. These are mostly visual plugins that improve the aesthetics of the game. Turn on animation smoothing and see if you like it. Personally, it helps me recognize movement and animations better, but I know some people just don't like it. Next up is the GPU plugin. This one is big. This plugin allows your GPU to be involved in drawing the game. Normally, the game runs only on your CPU. But by using your GPU, you can get way better performance as well as have some additional benefits. First of all, you can unlock FPS. If you have a decent GPU or bad CPU, your FPS will surely go up when using this plugin. Additionally, you can increase draw distance. This lets you basically increase your in-game vision. Having it at 40 allows you to see pretty much every room in the theater, which is often convenient and quality of life. An alternative to the GPU plugin is the 117 HD plugin from the plugin hub. Personally, I don't like it, although it does look kinda cool. I like how old school looks though, and the HD plugin makes certain effects harder to spot, even though they might look nicer. Next up is a section of plugins that give active, real-time overlay information. The first plugin I want to talk about is Boosts Information. This plugin can show several overlays that tell you your stats without having to see your skills tab. This is useful to see if you're still fully boosted or drained down. Next, the Timers plugin shows overlay boxes that have a timer for certain buffs. These include buffs like the 2-minute stamina timer, the 5-minute divine timer, and even a vengeance cooldown timer. Obviously, it's useful to know when your active buffs will expire. Following that logic, it's also useful to know when your spec and HP regen happens. The next plugin, Regeneration Meter, shows a regeneration bar on your HP and spec orbs. This way you can always tell when you're about to regen spec. Another useful overlay comes from the Rune Pouch plugin. This plugin can show which runes are in your pouch and how many. The next section is about markers. First, I want to talk about screen markers and inventory tags. Screen markers let you draw a box anywhere on the screen. With this plugin, you can mark high priority, static locations, such as the Ice Brush spell, or anything else you might find useful. This way, you always know where the spell is without having to be on the spellbook tab, increasing your accuracy to click it quickly after switching tabs. Inventory tags, on the other hand, let you mark gear. This can be useful to keep track of what you have equipped and what's in your inventory. I don't recommend using this long term, but it can be useful to people who are still learning to switch gear and keep losing track of what they have equipped in rooms like Maiden and the Nilo boss. In the same style of plugins as screen markers and inventory tags are ground markers and tile indicators. The ground markers plugin lets you permanently mark tiles, which can be useful to keep track of where certain save spots are and anything else you might use marked tiles for. I suggest looking at a beginner ToB video if you're unsure of which tiles to mark. I would share my marked tiles, but they are personalized to high-level ToB, and if you don't have your own markings yet, mine won't be very helpful to you. The Tile Indicators plugin can, instead of marking static tiles, mark the tile of your own character, as well as your destination tile. Marking your own tile can be useful if you don't understand movement very well yet. With this plugin on, it can be easier to see when to attack Verzik during webs and how to run the maze. However, for the maze, I find the destination tile a much more useful tool. This plugin marks the tile you click and will keep it marked until your character arrives at the tile. When the marked tile disappears, you know you've then reached your destination. By clicking a maximum distance of 2 tiles at a time, your destination tile will disappear every tick of movement, which can then help you run the maze much more smoothly. Still in the same category of plugins is NPC Indicators. NPC Indicators is used to mark NPCs and their tiles. This plugin is useful to see where bloat is through the tank, and which tiles are considered under a boss. Knowing which tiles are under the boss is useful to tank and flinch them, as well as how to move around them without moving the boss. I recommend putting all the top bosses in the NPCs to highlight section. In terms of the settings for these plugins, I personally like them to be very mild overlays. The way I have it set up is that all my marked tiles and NPCs look slightly darker and have a low opacity. This makes them stand out, but don't make my client look like a disco room. Set this up however you prefer though. The next plugin I want to point out is the tick counter. This plugin doesn't necessarily improve your gameplay, but it lets you keep track of how much time in combat you have compared to others. I like using it with learners, and when raids don't go as well as I hoped, as a tool to see if anyone is losing out on too many hits during a certain room, or how well I keep up with my teammates. Keep in mind that this plugin does not keep track of efficient ticks. It merely counts attacks and cannot keep track of prayer and gear switches, or correct style usage. Next up is a plugin I used a lot during my 416 and We Do Raids adventures. The plugin in question is RuneWatch. RuneWatch has been a community-controlled service to report and track known scammers. If you get scammed alone or a split, you can report the scammer to RuneWatch with as much evidence as you can provide. They then review your submission and decide whether it's a convincing case or not. The RuneWatch plugin will notify you with a chat box warning that a known scammer is nearby, reducing your odds of joining a team with a known scammer. So at this point in the video, we have arrived at the plugins that were previously only available on cheat clients. Don't be mistaken though, they have been approved by RuneLite, who have been working with Jagex. All these plugins are now considered legal and should therefore never have been considered cheat plugins in the first place. They were considered as such because they were only available on cheat clients that also supported actual cheat plugins, such as Sharing the Maze and Bloat Stomp tick counters to Ticky. I do strongly advise the plugins in this list as they are extremely useful in ToB and they're legal. Let's see what we have access to now. First of all, I want to talk about a super useful quality of life plugin, Menu Entry Swapper. If you don't have Menu Entry Swapper enabled, you don't know what you're missing. There's a huge list of menu swaps that you can pick and choose from. Just find the settings that you like. Additionally, there is now a plugin hub version called Custom Menu Swaps. This plugin allows you to swap and hide all kinds of menu entries. This is going to be a longer explanation because there's a lot to cover. You can, for example, type offer 10, LOLRune in custom swaps, and this will cause you to left-click offer 10 in a trade screen. This is useful for when you're often trading small amounts and don't want to have to always right-click the menu. You can adjust all menus to be left-click to whatever you like, as long as the option exists. You cannot offer 11, for example, because that's not a right-click menu option. These custom swaps can be very useful for Nihilika's waves. In fact, this plugin comes close to being the wheelchair plugin that some of you dirty cheaters might have used. You can type attack, Nihilika's Hagios, to always prioritize mage Nylos to be left click. If you then left click a stack of Nylos with a mage in it somewhere, you'll always click the mage Nylo first, regardless of which would normally be on top. If you use these Nylo wave swaps, you might also want to use the Verzik and special attack swaps. Attack, Verzik Viter, and use, special attack. The plugin will remember what it last read, so the bottommost swap is the most prioritized one. When you're at Verzik and Crab Spawn, if you don't have Attack Verzik under Attack Nylikos, you might accidentally click a Crab instead of Verzik. Similarly, if you don't put Use, Special Attack under Attack, Verzik, you might click straight through the Spec Orb because Verzik is underneath it, and Verzik gets prioritized. Another really useful command is Arceus, Spellbook Swap. This allows you to left-click Spellbook Swap to Arceus, making it way more convenient to Thrall while on Lunars. Every line can hold only up to one swap, and if you put invalid syntax, which means code the computer can't understand, it will just ignore that line. I'm using invalid syntax to not have certain swaps active by adding a slash before the line. I can then simply activate the swap whenever I want by removing the slash. I'll put a nicely set up custom swap list in the description, one that is way better than I'm showing in the video. Additionally, you can use the plugin to hide certain menu options. For example, you can hide attack options or talk to options on certain NPCs. Another example is that you can make certain buy options left click. At the top chest, I like to use left click to buy sharks and brews, instead of having to right click the menu all the time. It may be intimidating to figure out your settings at first, but this plugin is a godsend. Trust me and set this up. If you don't want to think about it, just copy the swaps that I put in the description in the order that I put them in. Certain swaps are illegal and therefore disabled. You can't create any illegal menu swaps with this plugin and accidentally cheat, so don't worry. Next up are object markers and radius markers. The object markers plugin marks, like the name suggests, objects. A useful object to mark in ToB are the Zarpa's exhumed. Each exhumed has to be individually marked, so it'll take a while to finish off the room, but by marking the exhumes, you're able to spot them sooner and with more ease. The radius marker plugin lets you mark the radius of Verzik's exploding crab's explosion radius. This radius is different from their NPC indicator tau marking and is therefore more useful. If you step into the explosion radius, you trigger their explosion, and knowing exactly where that radius is naturally very useful. Another radius you can mark is the path of the Bloodspawn in Maiden. The Bloodspawn has a certain direction, and that direction can be marked, basically showing where it's going, one tick ahead of time, giving you more time to dodge. This plugin is a bit of a pain to set up, so bear with me. Once you activate it, you need to find the tab in the far right of your RuneLite client. Then, you add 4 new radius markers and copy the values from the image on the screen. Next up is Entity Hider. Entity Hider has been part of RuneLite for years, but a new feature was added. You can now hide dead NPCs, which removes them from the screen directly when they reach 0 HP, instead of after their death animation. This is useful because during a death animation, you can still click the dead NPC. This can block your clicks and basically nulls the clicks because you cannot actually attack a dying NPC. There's an extension to this plugin that I'll discuss soon, but first let's talk about the Party plugin. The Party plugin now is what was used to be known as Socket. This plugin allows you to join a party by typing in a certain password, or rather group name. Once in the group, you can see stats like HP and prayer of everyone in the group, and they can see yours. There are several on-screen overlays that you can turn on or off. Just like that, the Party plugin doesn't seem so useful, but there are some extras that you can get from the plugin hub. First is Special Attack Counter. This plugin, along with the Party plugin, will share an overlay of what specs have hit between your party members. It shows the amount of dragon warhammers and the total damage of BGS specs, which is useful information to know if a boss is zero defense without having to call specs. On top of that, you can get the Hub Party panel, which is a side panel plugin that shows additional information like inventories, equipped gear, active prayers, and current stats. This can be helpful to know if your teammates still have spec, how much food they have, if they need stamina, etc, etc. And last but not least, there's Nilo Death Indicators. This plugin is used for high skill ToB and removes Nilos from the screen based on your XP drop. If your XP drop is high enough to kill said Nilo, it will be removed from the screen through Entity Hider. Not only that, but it shares this information with your teammates and it will also be removed for them. This prevents doubling up unnecessarily and so increases efficiency. There's another Nilo plugin that I want to point out. Better NPC Highlight. Better NPC Highlight is a new plugin hub plugin that can help you during the Nilo room. Basically, what you can do is highlight the big Nilo's death animation. This means that even though you can't see or click the actual dying Nilo, its death location is marked until the splits spawn at the end of its animation. To get this working, put in these tile IDs and change the color as follows. Make the highlight color have about 130 opacity and the fill color 0 opacity. This way you can always tell when splits are about to spawn. Another cool plugin is called Theater of Blood Stats. This plugin prints information about the room after it's done, such as room split times of when the crabs spawned at Maiden, what the Nilo boss time was, and how much healing happened. This has no performance value, but I personally like knowing the specific information about what happened during a room. Okay, it's finally time for the big one. I've been holding off on writing this because it's just so big, but I can't stall any longer since we're coming towards the end of the list. ToB Qual is the biggest ToB plugin that currently exists and it is beautiful. There are 8 sections: General, Maiden, Bloat, Nilo, Sot, Zarp, Verzik, and font settings. Some of the settings don't need an explanation, so I'll only address the important and maybe confusing ones. Under Maiden, Display Crab's Health is huge. It draws a text overlay over each crab and tells you their health in percentage or hit points. I like percentages just because I'm used to them, but pick as you like. Under Nilo, Recolor menu is pretty useful. This will recolor the names of the crabs to their style. Range Nilos will have a green name, Mage Nilos will have a blue name, and Melee Nilos will have a grey name. The role selector is also useful. This will create a small overlay on which you can toggle which Nilos to mark. This marking effect is different from NPC indicators because the marking is colored based on the style of the Nilo it belongs to. Definitely select your own role and maybe also a secondary style that you switch to often. The instance timer is good to have on. Always enter on 0 if you care about rune times. Under Sodasec, there is also an instance timer. This timer is different from the others because you don't use it for entry. What you can actually do is get off the maze on 3, no matter where it leads. The maze cycle ends on 4. If there is nobody on the maze when the cycle ends, the maze despawns and the fight continues. So if you step off the maze on 3, you can run through a dangerous part of the maze without getting hit because the maze will disappear on that tick and it can't do damage if it's not there. You can also change projectile team to Inferno. This makes the mage and ranger orbs appear bigger, like the ones that blob in the Inferno fires. You can also choose to hide the widescreen that you get when you get teleported through the maze. I personally don't like getting flashbang twice a raid, so I have the widescreen turned off for sure. Under Zarpus you can enable an instance timer also. This one is just like Nilika's. Enter on 0. I also have the screech changed to the sheesh meme. You can adjust the volume of this and I just find it easier to hear this way. For Verzik, you can have a health overlay on the red crabs and mark the tile of everybody's tornado. Not a big deal, but useful nonetheless. Finally, there are some font settings. Play around with this and see what you like best, or just copy what I have. So some of you might really miss tick counters on bosses like Maiden, Zarpus, and Verzik. There is a solution, but it's pretty ugly. Personally, I don't find it worth it for any room other than maybe Verzik, but you can use it however you want. The solution I'm talking about is the visual metronome. Basically, you can set this plugin to an X amount of ticks and it will then count up to that tick and reset. If you set this plugin to, for example, 7, you can then use it as a tool to tank Versic P3 with. It's not as easy as that though, because you need to keep a few things in mind. First, you need to find which tick is the correct tick. The step under tick is different every Versic, based on when you turned on the metronome and based on her P3 spawn. The best way to figure out what the tick is to have a scythe and stay on tick from the beginning of P3. Then on your third swing, you step under right away and look at which tick you clicked under on. That tick will be the correct tick to step under until webs. After webs, the number goes up by 1. When tornadoes spawn, it no longer works because her attack speed goes from 7 to 5. For Zarpus and P2, you can set the metronome to 4. Then, you look at the metronome and will have to find which tick to step back on. Once you find it, it won't change for Zarpus, and it will only change for Versic during Red Crabs because she stops attacking, which changes the cycle. So, there is also a way to sort of highlight Bloat's falling limbs. These limbs cast shadows before they fall, and I'm going to help you make them far more visible than they are by default. The plugins needed to accomplish this are Skybox and Ground Object Hider. First, we remove the bloat floor using Ground Object Hider. You need to add these IDs to hide in the plugin's settings. If you leave it like this, the floor will be completely black and you will not be able to see the shadows. However, there is a way to make this black background a different color. This is where the Skybox plugin comes in. Skybox is a plugin that lets you set a different color to, well, the sky. The bloat floor isn't really a sky, you might say, but we've removed the floor, remember? And what's underneath? The sky. If you change the sky color to something really light, the shadows will be easily visible and it's almost as if they're highlighted. Nice. Last up are 2 useful plugins for the speedrunners among us. You can now get Phoenix Necklace Jingle and the Godbook plugin in the plugin hub. The PNAC Jingle is basically a sound cue as soon as your PNAC procs, which helps you equip a new one in time. The Godbook plugin tracks Godbook timing of you and your teammates, and is used for several strategies in max efficiency ToB. Well, that's it. This is as extensive of a ToB plugin guide as I could make. I hope this helped, and if you have any questions you can ask them in the comments and I'll try to answer them as best as I can. Good luck ToBing, and as always, thanks for watching.